I paid for college. He cut me off after graduation. That's not an exaggeration. That's the literal sequence of events. On a Saturday in May, I watched my only son walk across the stage in a cheap black gown at a big state university in the Midwest. I clapped until my hands burned. I yelled his name even though they'd asked us not to. I cried. I took 100 pictures. On Sunday, my number was blocked. Not, "Oh, I've been busy, Dad." Not, "I'll call you next week, work is crazy." Blocked. The last text I got from him came the night of his graduation party, when I was in my motel room 2 miles from campus, still wearing my dress shoes, tie loosened, staring at the glow of my phone. It said, "Dad, I need some space. Please don't contact me for a while. I know you paid for college. I'm grateful. But I can't breathe around you. I need distance." I read it 3 times, waiting for it to rearrange itself into something that hurt less. Then I hit call. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Message failed to send. I stared at the screen, at that one line that wouldn't stop echoing in my head. "I know you paid for college. I'm grateful, but I can't breathe around you." That was 2 years ago. If you'd asked me back then what the story was, I would have told it like this. I paid for college, he cut me off after graduation. Kids these days, right? No respect, no gratitude. That was my favorite line for a while. I used it on coworkers, on my buddies at the bar, on anyone who would listen and shake their head and agree that yes, the younger generation is entitled and soft and doesn't know how good they have it. It made me feel better, for about 5 minutes at a time. Then I'd go home to my quiet house in Indiana, open the door to his old room, see the high school football trophies and the faded poster of some band he loved when he was 16, and feel something heavy settle in my chest. How did we get from, "It's you and me, kid," to, "Please don't contact me"? For a long time, I thought the story was about money. I paid for college, he cut me off. Debt and gratitude, investment and return. It took me a long time, and a lot of nights staring at the ceiling, to realize the truth. It was never just about the money. It was about control, about expectations, about a kid who grew up with a single dad who loved him so hard it started to feel like a cage, and a dad who had to learn, way too late, that paying for college doesn't buy you a lifetime pass into your son's life. This is the story of how I lost my son the week he graduated, and what it took for both of us to even begin talking again. It turns out you can't fix "I paid for college, he cut me off after graduation" with a checkbook. You have to fix what was there long before tuition. You have to look at the past, even the parts you really, really don't want to see. My name is Mike. I'm 55 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've introduced myself like this. I'm a single dad. I raised my boy on my own. If you say that in the right tone of voice, people look at you like you're some kind of hero. The truth's messier. My ex-wife Jenna and I met in community college. We got married too young, had our son too young, and grew apart too fast. We were 23 when our son Tyler was born. We were 30 when she packed a suitcase and moved to Arizona with a guy from her work. "I'm not cut out to be a mom," she'd said, crying, when we sat at the kitchen table and told Tyler she was leaving. He was 7. He didn't understand. All he knew was that Mom's car drove away and didn't come back. For a while there were phone calls, then fewer calls, then new kids, new life. The last time she visited was when Tyler was 13. She took him to the mall, bought him a pair of sneakers I couldn't afford, and promised to come back in the summer. He's 24 now. She hasn't been back. So yeah, it was me and him. Dads in his school would say things like, "Man, I don't know how you do it," when I showed up alone at parent-teacher conferences or football games. "I just do what I have to," I'd say, which is Midwestern for, "I'm barely holding this together, but what's the alternative?" I worked full-time as an electrician, did weekend side jobs, and picked up any overtime I could. The deal I made with myself at 30 was simple. He will not feel abandoned by both parents, not on my watch. I made another deal too, though I didn't say it out loud until much later. I will pay for college, no matter what. I never got to finish college. Jenna dropped out when she got pregnant. I left to work and never went back. In our town, that mattered. The guys who went to college had offices. The rest of us had knees that hurt in the winter. So I pinned my unfinished dreams to my son's future like a medal he hadn't earned yet. "You're going to college," I told him when he was 10, sitting at the kitchen table with his math homework spread out in front of him. He shrugged. "Okay." "You're not going to be stuck like me," I added, tapping my calloused fingers on the table. "You're going to have options." Back then, it felt like love. Maybe it was. Love and fear, tangled up so close I couldn't tell them apart. We had our rituals, like any American father-son duo in a small town. Friday nights in the fall were for high school football, him playing, me in the stands with a thermos of coffee, yelling loud enough for both parents. Saturday mornings, I made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse long after he was too old to find it cute. He'd roll his eyes and eat them anyway. We watched the Colts on Sundays, yelled at the TV, argued about quarterbacks. I went to every game, every band concert, every parent night. I double-checked homework. I quizzed him on vocab words while we drove to school in my old Ford. From the outside, we were a success story. Single dad, good kid, nothing on fire. People would tell me, "You must be so proud of him," and I was. God, I was. I was also scared out of my mind. Scared he'd make the same mistakes I did. Scared he'd end up stuck, paycheck to paycheck, in a job that chewed him up. So I became vigilant. That's the nice word. The less nice word is controlling. I made chore charts and curfews and non-negotiable rules. I read every grade report like it was a diagnosis. "A B in math," I'd say. "You're smarter than that. What happened?" "Dad, it's one test," he'd groan. "B's turn into C's if you're not careful," I'd snap back. "You want to be stuck here forever? You want to be like me, crawling under houses in February?" He'd mutter, "No," and trudge back to his room with his textbook. It sounded in my head like motivation. It sounded to him like something else. But I didn't know that then. Junior year of high school, the college machine kicked in. We did campus tours, sat through financial aid nights in the cafeteria, learned new acronyms, SAT, FAF, SA, EFC. I had a binder, an actual binder with tabs. I ran numbers on tuition and living expenses, circled deadlines on calendars, printed scholarship lists. "College is expensive," people would say. "You sure you want to pay for all of it yourself?" "I'll figure it out," I'd reply. "It's my job." Tyler never asked me to. He never said, "Dad, you have to pay for college." But he also never said, "You don't have to." He just floated along in the current I created. When he got into Indiana State with a partial scholarship, I nearly burst with pride. "We did it," I said, clapping him on the back. He gave me a small smile. "Yeah," he said, "we did." I didn't see the shadow in his eyes. All I saw was the runway to my dream. If you want to understand why my son cut me off after graduation, you have to understand how I treated college. I didn't treat it like a gift. I treated it like an investment. We celebrated the acceptance letter with pizza and a cheap bottle of champagne I'd had in the back of the fridge for a year, for when we get the news. Then, the very next day, I sat Tyler down at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. "Okay," I said. "We need to talk about expectations." He leaned back, wary. "Expectations?" he repeated. "I am paying for college," I said. "Tuition, books, housing, meal plan, you know that. I'm not complaining, but I need you to understand something. This isn't free. You're going there to work, to build a life, not to party your way through 4 years on my dime." He exhaled. "I know, Dad." "Do you?" I pressed. "Because I've seen kids get handed something they didn't earn and throw it away. I can't afford for you to do that." "I won't," he said. I believed him. I also didn't. So I laid out the rules. You'll keep a 3.0 GPA or higher. You'll call me every Sunday. You won't change your major without talking to me first. You won't get into debt. You'll remember that other people don't have this opportunity. At the time, it sounded reasonable. "Okay," he said, voice flat. Sure, I got it. If he resented it, he didn't show it much. Not then. Freshman year, I drove him to campus in my truck, bed full of boxes and plastic totes. We carried them up 3 flights of stairs to a dorm room that smelled like dust and anxiety. I helped him loft his bed, hang a couple of posters, set up his mini fridge. When it was time for me to go, we stood in the parking lot. "You call me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed. "It's not like I'm going to Mars, Dad." "Feels like it," I muttered. On the drive home, I cried. Not big sobs, just tears slipping out at red lights. My house felt foreign that night without his shoes by the door, his music thumping from his room, his cereal bowl in the sink. So I made a ritual. Every Sunday at 7 p.m., I sat in my recliner with my phone on the armrest and waited. Sometimes he called on time, sometimes he didn't. When he did, the conversations went like this. "How's school?" "Fine." "How are your classes?" "Fine." "Meeting people?" "Yeah." "You staying on top of your work?" "Yeah, Dad." "Any tests coming up?" "Next week." "You studying enough?" "Yeah." If I heard laughter in the background, I'd ask, "You drinking?" He'd laugh. "Dad, I'm not going to tell you that even if I am." "That's not funny," I'd say. "I'm serious. You screw this up, and I'll be crawling under houses like you." "I know," he'd finish, half joking, half annoyed. I thought we were just doing the normal American kid goes to college, dad worries dance. Looking back, I hear something else. Him trying to carve out a space that was his. Me trying to crawl into it. Sophomore year, he changed his major. I found out on a Sunday call. "Yeah, so I switched from mechanical engineering to psychology," he said casually, like he was telling me he'd switched brands of toothpaste. I sat up straighter. "You what?" "Switched majors." "To what?" "Psychology." I laughed once, sharp. "Psychology?" I repeated. "What are you going to do with that? Read people's minds in line at Starbucks?" He sighed. "Dad." "Do you know what engineers make?" I interrupted. "Good money, benefits. You could write your ticket." "I was miserable," he said. "I was failing calculus. I hated every minute. I like my psych classes. I'm good at them." "Liking something doesn't pay the bills," I snapped. "You think I'm breaking my back to pay for a degree that won't get you a real job?" There it was. Real job. College was an investment. Engineers had ROI. Psych majors didn't, in my mind. "I talked to my advisor," he said, defensive now. "There are jobs. Counseling, research, HR, a bunch of stuff." "Counselors don't make money unless they go to grad school," I shot back. "Are you expecting me to pay for that, too?" "No," he said, voice tight. "I'm not expecting you to pay for anything. I didn't ask you to." I flinched. "Excuse me?" I said. He took a breath. "I appreciate that you're paying for college," he said, choosing his words carefully like he was defusing a bomb. "I do, but it's my life. I have to be able to live with what I'm studying. I can't do 4 years of something I hate just because it sounds better to you." "You think I love crawling through attics?" I said. "You think I wake up excited to rewire old houses? Sometimes you do what you have to do." "I know," he said softly, "but maybe I don't have to do the same thing you did." We didn't talk for 2 weeks after that. He apologized first. I let him. What I didn't do was sit with what he'd said. That would have required me to admit that maybe my dream for his life wasn't the only valid one. Instead, I doubled down on my role as the financier. Anytime he talked about a class he liked, I'd say, "Hope it leads to a job." Anytime he mentioned someone dropping out or changing majors, I'd say, "Must be nice to waste money like that." When tuition went up junior year, I made sure he knew exactly how much. "That's another $3,000, I told him on the phone, reading off the bill. "You know how many hours I have to work for that?" Yeah, Dad, he said quietly. I do. In my head, I was teaching him the value of money. What I was really teaching him was this. My love is tied to my sacrifice. My sacrifice is tied to your performance. If you stop performing the way I want, all of this falls apart. When you grow up with divorced parents, you learn early that love can be conditional. I wanted to be better than that. I didn't realize I was just making my conditions sound nobler. Part 4/6. Graduation Day and the Text. Senior year snuck up on both of us. One day he was a nervous freshman moving into a concrete dorm. The next, he was sending me a picture of himself in a cap and gown, standing in front of the campus fountain. Can you make it to graduation? He texted. Ceremony's at 10, party at 3 at the apartment. Can I make it? I'd been planning for that day for 4 years. I took off work, booked a motel room, shined my only pair of black dress shoes. The morning of the ceremony, the arena was packed with proud American families clutching programs, craning their necks to spot their kid in a sea of black robes. When they called his name, Tyler Michael Carter, Bachelor of Science in Psychology, something in my chest squeezed. That's my boy, I yelled, louder than I meant to. He flashed a quick smile in my direction, then moved on, swallowed by the procession. Afterward, we met outside by the big campus sign. He looked different, older, tired. Something in his shoulders I hadn't seen before. I hugged him hard. I'm proud of you, I said into his hair. Thanks, Dad, he replied, patting my back. Megan was there too, his girlfriend of a year. She took our pictures on her phone and mine, made sure we got one of just the two of us. You'd think, looking at those pictures, that everything was fine. The blow-up came later, at the party. His apartment was full of people when I arrived. Roommates, girlfriends, friends of friends. Pizza boxes on the table, cheap beer and coolers. Music a little too loud. I brought a card with a check inside. Not a huge amount, but enough to say, I believe in you, get started. Inside the card I'd written, Dear Tyler, I paid for college and I'd do it again. I'm proud of the man you're becoming. Love, Dad. It was corny. It was also true, as far as I understood the truth then. He opened it, glanced at the check, and said, Thanks, Dad, really. Then he moved on to greet a friend. I stood there, holding a paper plate, feeling strangely extra. At some point, I ended up in the tiny kitchen with him and Megan. So, I said, trying to sound casual, what's the plan now that you're a college graduate? He shrugged, pulling a beer from the fridge. I've got an interview at the counseling center down on Maple, he said. Entry level, more like a support position. Not exactly counseling yet, but it's a start. And I'm thinking about grad school in a couple years. A counseling center, I repeated. How much do they pay? He hesitated. Not a lot, but it's experience. Experience doesn't pay rent, I said. You got offered that job at the insurance company, right? Customer service or whatever? He frowned. Yeah, but I don't want to spend my days getting yelled at about premiums. It pays more, I said. Has benefits. You could do that for a few years, get stable, then figure out the counseling thing. Megan spoke up. We've talked about it, she said. The counseling center job isn't glamorous, but it's in his field. It's a foot in the door. That matters. I looked at her. I'm talking to my son, I said, sharper than I intended. Her jaw tightened. We're a team, she replied. We make decisions together. Something hot flared in my chest. A team, huh? I said. That's great, but who's been paying for this team's MVP to be here the last 4 years? Dad, Tyler warned. No, seriously, I barreled on, the beer and the years of fear mixing into something ugly. I paid for college. I worked extra jobs. I put everything on the line so you wouldn't have to start where I started. And now you're telling me you're going to turn down good money for some low-paying experience job? The kitchen got very quiet. People in the next room laughed at something, the sound weirdly distant. Tyler's face went blank in that way I'd started to recognize, his shutdown look. I appreciate what you've done, he said slowly, but it doesn't give you veto power over my life. It gives me a say, I shot back. I have skin in this game. This isn't a game, he said, voice rising. It's my life. Megan stepped closer to him. You're not the only one who supported him, she said. I've been here too. I've watched him stress himself sick trying to live up to everyone's expectations. He deserves to make choices that don't kill him. I turned on her. You've known him for what, a year? I snapped. I've been here since he came home from the hospital. Don't talk to me about what he deserves. Okay, enough, Tyler said loudly. Someone in the living room turned the music down, sensing the tension. Tyler looked at me, eyes bright with a kind of anger I'd never seen in him. Dad, he said, this is exactly what I'm talking about. What? I demanded. You think paying for college means you get to control every decision I make? He said. My major, my job, who I date, how I live? You say it's because you love me, but it doesn't feel like love. It feels like a contract I never agreed to. His words hit like a fist. That's how you see it? I said. After everything I've done? I never asked you to pay for everything, he replied. You chose that, and I'm grateful. I've said that 100 times. But every time I try to do something you don't like, you throw it in my face. I paid for college. I sacrificed. I worked so hard. I know you did. But I can't keep living like I owe you my entire life for it. My face burned. You're being dramatic, I said. All I'm asking is that you be smart. Take the stable job. Use your degree for something that actually pays. I am being smart, he said, just not in the way you want. We stared at each other. Megan put a hand on his arm. Maybe we should take a break, she suggested. I shook my head. I raised you, I said, voice shaking. I gave up everything for you. He took a breath like he was about to dive underwater. And I appreciate that, he said. But I didn't ask you to make me your entire purpose, Dad. I didn't ask to be your second chance at life. I just wanted to be your kid. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He looked so tired. I can't do this right now, he said finally. Not today. Not on this day. He walked away. The party went on around me, music up again, people laughing, a group starting some drinking game in the corner. I stood in that cramped kitchen with my paper plate and my anger and my hurt. Later, back in my motel room, the anger softened into a familiar story. After all I've done, this is what I get. I stared at the TV without seeing it. My phone buzzed. It was the text. Dad, I need some space. Please don't contact me for a while. I know you paid for college. I'm grateful. But I can't breathe around you. I need distance. By the time I processed the words, he'd blocked me. Just like that. I paid for college. He cut me off after graduation. For a long time, that's where I wanted the story to end, with me as the tragic hero and him as the ungrateful villain. But stories don't end just because you stop talking. They keep going in the dark. For the first few months after the block, I did what a lot of American men my age do with pain. I turned it into a bit. I paid for college. He cut me off after graduation, I'd tell the guys at work, laughing like it was a sitcom plot. They're all like that, one of them would say. My daughter moved to Portland and never calls. Whole generation's allergic to phones unless it's TikTok. We'd all nod and agree that kids these days don't know loyalty, don't know sacrifice. I repeated the story at barbecues, at the VFW, even once to my pastor. Sometimes people would cluck their tongues and say, "That's awful, Mike. After everything you did?" Sometimes they'd say gently, "There's always two sides." I didn't want to hear about the other side. My version was simple, clean. Then my sister Beth ruined it. We were sitting on her back porch one Saturday night, nursing beers while her husband grilled. She listened to my usual story. I paid for college, he cut me off, kids are ungrateful, and didn't nod along like everyone else. Instead, she said, "Do you remember when we were kids and Dad used to say, 'You owe me,' every time he bought us something?" I frowned. Our father was not a man we quoted fondly. "I remember him saying that when he paid for my prom dress," she continued. "He'd say it when he filled my gas tank. 'You owe me. Remember who's keeping the lights on. Remember who's paying for this roof.'" I shifted in my chair. "That's different," I said. "He was an ass. I'm not an ass." She gave me a look. "Mike," she said, "I love you. But you do hear yourself, right?" "What's that supposed to mean?" I snapped. It means I've heard you say I paid for college more times than I can count, she replied. To Tyler, to your friends, to anyone who will listen. I know you're proud. You should be. It's a big deal. But when you say it like it's a bill he hasn't paid yet, that's not love. That's a tab you keep open. I stared at her. She went on. You remember how it felt when Dad said that stuff? She asked. Like everything came with strings? Like nothing was just because he loved us? Memories flared. Dad slamming his hand on the kitchen table, yelling about ungrateful brats because we'd asked for new shoes. Dad reminding Mom over and over how he'd paid for this house whenever they fought. I swallowed. I'm not him, I said automatically. I know, Beth said. You show up. You stayed. He didn't. You've done a lot right. But good people can still pass on bad patterns. I hated how much sense that made. I hated that she was holding up a mirror and I could see my father's outline in my reflection. That still doesn't excuse what Tyler did, I muttered. Blocking me? After everything? No, she agreed. It doesn't excuse it, but maybe it explains some of it. She took a sip of her beer. Look, she said, you say it like this. I paid for college, he cut me off after graduation. What if his version is, he paid for college and then never let me forget it? I couldn't breathe, so I cut him off. The words sat between us, heavy. I don't want that to be his version, I said quietly. Then maybe you need to find out what his version actually is, she replied. Not the one you've made up, the real one. How? I asked, frustrated. He blocked me. He said he needs space. She shrugged. Give him space, she said. And in the meantime, maybe talk to someone who gets paid to help you untangle this stuff. You mean a therapist, I said, like it was a slur. She laughed. Yes, Mike, a therapist. It's not just for people in California. I rolled my eyes. I don't need therapy, I said. I need my son to stop acting like I'm the villain in his life. Maybe you're not the villain, she said. Maybe you're just the guy who hurt him without meaning to. Therapy won't make him call you, but it might make you less likely to blow it if he ever does. 2 weeks later, I sat in a beige office with a fake plant and a box of tissues on the table. The therapist, Dr. Moore, though she told me to call her Kelly, was a black woman about my age with kind eyes and a notebook she didn't seem to write much in. So, she said, what brings you here, Mike? I leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. My son cut me off, I said. I paid for college. After graduation, he blocked my number and said he needs distance. I'm trying to figure out how to live with that. She nodded. That sounds painful, she said. Tell me more about your relationship before the cutoff. I told her about being a single dad in Indiana, about working extra shifts, about promising to pay for college. I told her about rules and expectations and the major change fight. I told her about the kitchen scene at graduation and the text. I left out the parts where I sounded ugly. She paused. Can I reflect something back to you? She asked. I shrugged. Sure. You've used the phrase, I paid for college, he cut me off after graduation, a few times now, she said. It sounds like a headline, a summary. Have you noticed that? I frowned. It's just, what happened, I said. It's your version of what happened, she said gently. In your version, you are the giver and he is the ungrateful receiver. There's a lot of pain in that story, and it's real. But I'm curious, do you have any sense of what his headline might be? I shifted. I don't know, I muttered. Something like, my dad never stopped treating me like a project. Do you think there's any truth in that? She asked. I opened my mouth to say no. Then I pictured the binder, the Sunday quiz calls, the way I'd reacted to psychology like he'd announced he was majoring in clown school. I exhaled. Maybe, I said. But what was I supposed to do? Just let him drift? I was trying to protect him. From what? She asked. From my life, I said. from working jobs that break your body, from making the same mistakes I did. She nodded. Fear is a powerful motivator, she said. It sounds like you loved him a lot. And it sounds like that love got tangled up with your fear and your unfinished dreams. She paused. Did anyone ever pay for you? She asked. In the way you tried to pay for him? I snorted. Hell no, I said. Dad made us feel like charity cases if he bought us a burger. And Mom, well, she did what she could. So you wanted to give Tyler something you never had, she said. Exactly, I said. What's wrong with that? Nothing, she replied. Until the gift comes with a contract. I stared at her. I didn't have a contract, I said. I just had expectations. She smiled sadly. That's a contract, Mike, she said. You pay, he performs. If he deviates, you remind him of your payment. Over time, that can feel less like love and more like a ledger. The word landed. Ledger. I don't want him to feel like that, I said quietly. Wanting that is a good start, she said. The next step is taking responsibility for the ways you may have contributed to that feeling. Not to beat yourself up, to understand. We spent weeks, months doing that. We talked about my father, about his "you owe me" speeches, about how I'd sworn I'd never be like him and still somehow absorbed his language about debt and gratitude. We talked about love as a gift versus love as an account you keep checking. We talked about control, how trying to manage every risk in your kid's life eventually stops being protection and starts being suffocation. Do you think you can change him? She asked one day out of nowhere. No, I said. I can't even talk to him. Do you think you can change yourself? She asked. I sighed. I can try, I said. Good, she said. Because if he ever does unblock you, you're going to need to show up as someone who is less interested in being right and more interested in hearing his story. What if he never calls? I asked. She looked at me steadily. Then the work you're doing is still worth it, she said, because you deserve to live without that ledger too. 9 months after graduation, I got an email. Not a call, not a text, an email. The subject line said, "Hey, it's Tyler." My heart thudded so hard I could hear it. I stared at it for a full minute before clicking. Dad, I got your letter from Aunt Beth. I know you asked her just to pass it along, not to pressure me to respond. I've been sitting with it for a few weeks. I'm not ready to talk on the phone yet, but email feels like a place I can try. First, I know you paid for college. I know how much you worked. I am grateful. I've always been grateful, even if I didn't say it the way you wanted. Second, I didn't cut you off because of money. I cut you off because I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every choice I made felt like a referendum on your sacrifice. When I changed my major, when I took a job you didn't like, when I moved in with Megan, it felt like I was failing an exam I didn't agree to take. I needed distance to figure out who I am without hearing your voice in my head all the time. Your letter sounded different. You said you were in therapy. You said you were starting to understand some things about Grandpa and about how you raised me. You apologized for using "I paid for college" as a weapon. I appreciate that. I don't know where we go from here yet, but I'm willing to keep writing. Tyler. I read it 3 times. It was more than I deserved, less than I wanted, which is probably exactly what honesty feels like. The letter he mentioned had been hard to write. Kelly, my therapist, had suggested it. Don't defend yourself, she'd said. Don't explain your heart in a way that puts the burden back on him. Just own your part. Say what you're sorry for, say what you're working on, and say that you love him whether or not he responds. I'd written, I paid for college, and I'm proud of that. But I've used that fact like a club. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for making you feel like you were my second chance instead of just my son.
I'm sorry for acting like you owed me a certain kind of life. I'm sorry for every time I said real job when you talked about what you cared about. You don't owe me contact. You don't owe me a relationship. You don't owe me a certain title on your business card. I want a relationship with you because you're you, not because of what I did. Then I'd handed it to Beth, hands shaking. Give this to him if you see him, I'd said. No pressure, no strings. And now, here was his email. My first instinct was to fire back a long message. I always loved you. I was trying my best. You don't understand how hard it was. Kelly had warned me about that instinct. Defensiveness is understandable, she'd said, but it's not useful if your goal is connection. When in doubt, get curious. Ask, can you tell me more about that?
So I wrote this instead. Tyler, thank you for writing back. You didn't owe me that. I hear what you're saying about feeling like every choice was a test. That wasn't my intention, but I accept that it was your experience. I'm sorry. I would like to understand more if you're willing to share. Maybe you could tell me about one moment that really made you feel like you couldn't breathe around me. I promise to just listen. I love you. No strings attached. Dad. It took him a week to respond. In that week, I almost sent follow-up emails 3 times. I didn't. When his reply came, it was hard to read. He wrote about the night I'd laughed at his psychology major, about the way I'd compared his choices to my hard life, as if joy was something he had to earn extra, about graduation day in the kitchen, how small he'd felt when I brought up money in front of his friends and girlfriend. It wasn't just that you paid for college, he wrote. It was that you seemed to think paying for college meant you owned the outcome, that you had bought stock in my soul. That line took the wind out of me. I wrote back. He wrote back. We did that for months. Sometimes it was 1 paragraph at a time. Sometimes it was nothing for weeks. He told me about his job at the counseling center, about clients who reminded him of me, about teens who reminded him of him. He told me he was in therapy too. Apparently I have some father stuff, he wrote once with a wry emoji. I told him about my sessions with Kelly, about Dad, about Mom, about the binder and the ledger, and how it hurt to realize I'd made him feel like a project. Slowly, the story in my head started to change. It was no longer just, I paid for college, he cut me off after graduation. It was, I paid for college, I tied that payment to expectations he couldn't meet without losing himself. He cut me off to survive. We're both trying to build something new now. Almost a year after his first email, he wrote, I think I'm ready to see you. Coffee? Neutral ground. No graduation gowns. We met at a coffee shop halfway between my town and the city where he lived now. I got there early. I almost left twice. Then he walked in. He looked older, not just in the literal way, in the way people do when they've been through something and decided to keep going. Hey, he said. Hey, I said. We ordered coffee. We sat. For a minute, we talked about nothing. Work, weather, the Colts. Then he took a breath. Thank you for working on this, he said. Most people in your position would just double down on being hurt. I did, for a while, I admitted. Ask Beth. He smiled weakly. I'm sorry I blocked you, he said. I know it was harsh, but I didn't know how else to get out. I'm sorry I made blocking me feel like the only way to breathe, I replied. We sat with that. He told me more stories, little cuts I hadn't noticed making. I told him some too. How scared I'd been. How much of my identity was wrapped up in, I'm a single dad who paid for college. At one point, he said, it always felt like love with a side of pressure. I nodded. That's about right, I said. I was loving you with my foot on the gas pedal. He laughed, surprised. Yeah, he said. Exactly. We didn't fix everything in that one coffee. We didn't walk out best friends. We walked out in progress. A year later, he invited me to his apartment for Thanksgiving. Megan was there, still in the picture, now his fiancée. I brought a pie I bought from the store because I burned the first one trying to be fancy. We sat around a little table in their small dining room, and I watched him carve a turkey, not perfectly, but confidently. At some point, he raised his glass. "I want to make a toast," he said. "To Dad," he added, glancing at me, "who paid for college, and who's learning how to just be my dad, not my investor." Everyone laughed. My eyes burned. After dinner, while Megan was in the kitchen, he and I stepped out onto the tiny balcony. The city lights flickered below. "I know I might screw up again," I said. "Say the wrong thing. Push too hard." "You will," he said. "So will I." We both smiled. "I just want you to know," I added, "I don't think of you as my second chance anymore. You're you. That's enough." He nodded. "Thanks," he said. "And for the record, I am grateful you paid for college. I always was. I just need to live a life that feels like mine, not like your repayment plan." "That's fair," I said. We stood there in silence for a moment. Then he bumped my shoulder with his. "Come on, old man," he said. "We've got pie to eat." If you'd asked me 5 years ago what my son owed me, I would have had a whole list. Calls, visits, a certain kind of job, a certain kind of life. Now, he doesn't owe me anything. Not because college was cheap, not because I didn't sacrifice, but because love isn't a ledger. I paid for college. He cut me off after graduation. It was the worst thing that ever happened to me. It was also, somehow, the thing that finally forced me to stop trying to own his story and start learning how to be part of it, as a supporting character in whatever chapters he'll have me. I'm his dad, not his investor, not his manager, not his judge, just his dad. And that, it turns out, is worth more than any bill I've ever paid.